Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Fifth Meeple. We are a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. Each of us has a different tag that we identify ourselves by based on our personalities and play styles. I'm your host, the goofy noob, Daniela, and with me today is the intellectual introvert.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris.
And the collector.
Hey, this is David.
Thanks, guys, for joining us today. Today's episode, we are all about pushing our luck. We'll start with a trip to a quaint German town as we take on the Quacks of Quedlinburg, where devious doctors collect components and compare potions to wow the crowds at the local carnival. After that, it's a horse of a different color as we return to the American heartland to talk about Longshot, the dice game, manipulating and betting on horses as they unceremoniously make their way around the track. And finally, because we just can't help ourselves, we'll see whose side Lady Luck is on as we pit them against each other in our ultimate showdown, the Battle of the Funnest. But before we get into all of those festivities, David, what is our topic of discussion for today?
Okay, so today we are going to delve into artwork, specifically if designers should or should not use AI artwork. So this is a topic that's going on right now, a little debate in the board game community. Some people are very much against, using AI artwork in any kind of game, to the point where they will boycott a certain game or not buy it because it has AI art. Where you have on the flip side other, designers or young entrepreneurs that are trying to make board games that are using AI art because they can't, maybe afford an artist or something, but also to enhance, their games and development so that they get more eyeballs. So what do you think about this? And, would you buy a game that uses AI art versus having an artist do the artwork on a game?
I guess my first question is, have we played a game so far that has it, that we know of?
We have not, that I know of. So this is relatively new.
Okay.
I think you're going to start seeing games in the next couple of years that this is going to be a bigger debate about. But right now, it's just kind of entering in that collective consciousness, to board gamers and kind of, seeing how their reactions are to art that's coming out.
Yeah, I think, David, you and I we kind of played around with game design a little bit. And in order to be able to put something out there, you either need really good art or you'd have to go the AI route. And if you don't, then people will say, oh, that doesn't have very good art. But you do get into that battle of, yeah, but I can't afford it. Right? And you catch 22 of I can't afford good art until I sell some games. I can't sell some games until I get some good art. And so you either go with whatever the clip arts or the art packages you can buy out there are and try to make them work, or potentially jump on Midjourney or one of the others and get some really good stuff really fast. So that's a tough one. I think for something like that, prototyping, I don't have any issue with it whatsoever. You use AI for prototyping, get it clear what you're trying to accomplish. I think for a big publisher to use AI art, I think that's wrong. I think they should be using artists. There's no reason for them to have to do that. For someone that's self-publishing, I think it makes sense to do it, though.
Yeah, I think so. I do a little bit of graphic design for our church, and there's always something when you're designing that you have an idea in your mind that you want to do and you want to put out, and maybe the clip art isn't there, and maybe the things that you're thinking about are not there, and you have to go another route with what you're thinking of because it just doesn't come out on paper, it doesn't come out in print, it doesn't come out in something. And so I can see what you mean, Chris, by it's kind of a means to get to that next level of, hey, I may have to use this for a time being to jump to get my game out there and to be able to use that. I think it's one of those things that you're not going to not have in the future. It's going to be one of those things that people are contesting with. For me, would I or would I not buy a game based on that? For me, it's just a no, because if you're trying to start a game and you want to push that person who's designing the game forward and you want to support them, sure, I understand it. I understand, Chris, what you're saying about bigger companies should not do that. But I'm not really sure all the options are there for what sometimes a person is thinking of that they want to come out. So maybe AI, I don't know if you can use pieces and parts of AI. I'm not really even sure how all that mechanics fits together in that, but maybe using part of AI to get what you're looking for out of it and to make and model that. But I don't know. I'm not really hard pressed against not using that. I'm sorry to the artists. I like art. I enjoy art. I create myself. I know what it's like to have a frustration of not being able to make what you want to make out there. So I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this topic is definitely a sensitive one right now in the game community as far as, what sides people are drawing. I think lines are kind of being drawn a little bit right now. It's just interesting to see where the conversation's going. I know sometimes I looked at a couple different like forums that I'm involved in, and they would just like put in stuff to AI, like game components and stuff, and we would see this artwork come out with like, a title description that AI came out with. And it's just funny if you can guess what's a human one versus sometimes what's AI. And sometimes, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but other times, there's a game and you're like, oh, I wish I could play that game. And you just look at the game specs or like the board itself with, whatever name the AI came out with. And if you didn't know any better, you might say, hey, that game looks really interesting to me, just based off of, some kind of fantasy spewing out, certain things. I know, to me personally, I think right now my stance would probably be to try to only play games that artists are designing and putting out there as far as the artwork. But as far as like Chris was saying in the proto spiel and kind of that design, like where we kind of design games and stuff, I don't have, I guess, any issues with AI artwork being placed there. And if you're going to self-publish, I still would buy your game if you're using AI art because I know that route and kind of how hard it is. But I think that if your game is successful or you do get picked up by a publisher, then I would hopefully expect, an artist to come in and redo some of that AI work, even if it was really cool, just to kind of put not only your name as a designer out there, but also the artist name, because I think a lot of the artists benefit a lot of times too. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. And I think that's what the board game space is a lot of times. Artists will become popular, they'll popularize a board game because of their art, but then it kind of works the same way. Sometimes nobody would play that game unless the artwork looked a certain way. So you have these symbiotic relationships in board gaming, I feel like, with the artists a lot of times that definitely enhance it.
Well, yeah, and I'm wondering though if you could have that symbiotic relationship though with AI and an artist. Maybe they could use it within themselves to maybe a background, and then maybe doing the characters how someone wants the characters to be represented or something.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Chris, have you ever thought about, because I know you design stuff a little bit more than me when you're designing. I mean, I know AI artwork's, fairly new concept, but, would you, if you were designing something now, would you, look into maybe using it to try to get eyeballs to some of your design work?
Yeah, again, honestly, if it's that self-published route, then I'd probably would. I haven't played around with AI, but I'm in a lot of forums where I see what people can do with it, and it's crazy. And again, at first it was, oh yeah, it looks great, except for the fact that guy has 8 fingers, right? So and for some reason the AI couldn't get the fingers right. But the other thing though is, I guess 2 other things that I wanted to say on this. Number 1 would be that I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of legal questions out there, right? Because AI is pulling stuff from somewhere. Right. And so you look at some things, you say, well, that looks really familiar. I was actually doing something for work with AI, and I asked it to show me enterprise risk management things. And it just gave me 2 pages, like nothing. But I'm looking at that and saying, I just looked at a website, and a lot of that looks really, really similar. And so that AI is just going out and pulling stuff out.
Right.
And that's a lot of case with the art too, that, hey, it's not starting from nothing. It's starting from somebody's work and then morphing it. And is that okay? And I think that's not just from the part of taking an artist's job. I think that's something to be considered. But that unfortunately, I think you fast forward into the future, a lot of it's going to be AI because machines take over things that people do, and then people again find a different way to express themselves, use their art. I think that's inevitable. To me, it's more of, in my mind, a legal question right now of, is even what people are using is that okay from that standpoint?
Well, I guess in board games too, right? It's like we have a lot of mechanisms, right, that define board games, but a lot of times the mechanisms that we're seeing in modern board games are either takes off of other board games and just either enhanced, or maybe something's, deviated. But a lot of the stuff that, I'm seeing, it's a derivative of something that's already been out there, just done in a different way, right? So always, I always had the question too, when I was starting to design, is like, what can I take from another, mechanic that I see out there? Because, we can't necessarily trademark or copyright those mechanics in games. And so, it's kind of that same debate is like, how much is borrowing too much? Like a lot of people want to compare Ark Nova right now. Oh, it took so much stuff from Terraforming Mars. But then other games, I know that took a lot of stuff from other stuff. You don't hear it. It's only, I think sometimes if the game gets really popular, then people will be like, oh, well, this they pulled from this, or this they pulled from that, but they did it in still a different way. So that it's kind of like if you make, like if you're cooking, right, you can use the same ingredients as somebody else, all our ingredients can be exactly the same to start with if you watch any cooking show, but then the end results are totally different on how they prepped it, how they did it. So, where do you draw a line? I do think it's going to be messy, but I do think it's probably inevitable that, AI will start to do more and more in our natural lives, but also probably in the board gaming space too.
All right. Thanks for that topic, David. I'm sure we could talk about that all day long, but we'd love to know what all you guys think about that as well, and where we got it right and where we might have got it wrong. So let us know by sending us an email at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com. And also, before we get too much further, we want to thank everybody out there for listening and ask that you take just a second to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a show. We'd love to have you follow us on Instagram at fifthmeeple, jump onto our BGG Guild, or check us out at the website fifthmeeple.com. Finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could help us leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may listen to us. And of course, tell your friends all about us. And once again, thanks for listening, everybody. We're going to take a really short break to gather up our cauldrons. And then when we return, we'll get into our thoughts on the Quacks of Quedlinburg.
The Quacks of Quedlinburg is a push-your-luck bag-building game that places players in the role of quack doctors, concocting potions to heal everything from lovesickness to smelly feet while desperately trying not to blow up their cauldron. Each round, after a fortune teller card introduces a special rule, players draw chips from their bag one at a time, placing them in their cauldron along an increasingly numbered path. The number on the chip determines how far along the path the chip is placed, while the colors award special abilities that vary from game to game. As you fill your cauldron, if the total on all of your cherry bombs, represented by the white chips, exceeds 7, your potion explodes. Otherwise, you're free to keep pushing your luck. Once all players decide or are forced to stop adding ingredients, points and credits are earned based on how full each cauldron is, though an exploded potion can be used for either points or credits, but not both. The credits can be spent to buy 1 or 2 additional ingredient chips to place in your bag for future rounds. Rubies may also be earned, which assist players in a variety of ways, and the player with the fullest cauldron also earns an additional bonus. After 9 rounds of potion brewing, the player who has had the most pot luck and amassed the most points wins the game and the title of the most qualified quack in all of Quedlinburg. The Quacks of Quedlinburg was designed by Wolfgang Warsch and was first published in 2018 by Schmidt Spiel.
All right, Chris, thank you for that intro on the game. Very good game. We actually have played that here recently at the table that we've been playing at. So let's get into some of the opening, just all around best moments when we're playing this game. David.
So one of my favorite moments about Quacks of Quedlinburg is this was actually the very first game that I played that was a bag puller. And, the mechanic of putting, pieces into the bag and then drawing out and placing them on your board and kind of, continuously doing that and, pushing your luck in that way. I just find that mechanic of bag pulling just really awesome. And for some reason, it just sticks with me. So, after I played this game, I actually, back in the day, I went out and tried to find as many bag pullers as I could get my hands on because I just really like that mechanic. And it's something that is always fun to do because I think it's like, what am I going to get? So to me, that's one of my favorite moments about this game. And before I had played this, I had never seen that in a game before. So it was kind of, the best of both worlds on that front.
But there's still only so many bag pullers out there, right?
Yes.
Even though it's such a fun mechanic. I agree. I think it's really fun where you don't know what you're going to pull out and just that feeling of, first of all, are you going to do it? And then when you do it, just I think in the last game we played, David, you're like, I can't look at it. You're pulling it out, and Danielle had to tell you what it was. And I thought that was pretty funny. And the other interesting thing for me, though, is it is a push your luck game, but it's not totally random, right? It's not, I think of Can't Stop, and you push your luck, you're just going to roll the dice, and you have no idea what you're going to roll. Here, you know what's in your bag if you've been keeping track of it.
Right.
You can influence that as the game goes on, and you can build the kind of bag that you want to kind of help you out as you're pulling it out. And so it's not totally random. It is push your luck, but you know kind of what your odds are if you're keeping track of it. So I think that's fascinating, but you still get to that point where it's just that agonizing decision. Do I take one more chip out of the bag?
I know at one point I was even like, all right, I'm not going to pull because I'm done with my bag pulling. But if I did pull, what would it be? And because you want to see it. It's like one of those things that you're just like, what would I have pulled or should I have gone? And then sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I should have went for it. And other times you're like, no, I should have stopped right there. But how about you, Chris? Any more best moments of this game? I know we're just talking about the bag pulling aspect of it. That's a really fun mechanism. I think we all enjoy that a lot here.
Yeah, the other thing I like is, I mean, there are like 7 different colored chips that have different powers. And again, you can change those powers from game to game based on the different potion books or recipe cards that they have in there. And I think it's interesting, too, to just explore, okay, for the ones that you have out there, and I think they're pretty well paired the way they suggest you use them. What's the best sort of engine I can get running just with these little chips? How does that one feed off of this one? And okay, I've got this many, I've got enough yellows. Now what do I do next? And I think that's really interesting. Again, just a little mini puzzle in there of not just, it's not always going for the big numbers. I think that's important, but which colors are you using? How do they synergize with the other ones? And then it's all about, do they come out of the bag at the right time?
Yeah, because there was talk even in the last game that we played. Chris is like, those purple ones aren't anything. Those are nothing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to play the purples a little bit more. So I pulled out a couple purples and I kept moving down the score track. And Chris was like, you're trying to prove me wrong. So yeah, there's fun different deviations, I'll say, with that. And I noticed you and David both too in our last game, you saved up a lot of your guys' points to pull the higher number cards. So in some of the chits you can get, I'll just talk about yellows, you can get like a 1, a 4, or sorry, 1, a 2, and a 4, I believe, different numbers on the actual chits, depending on how much money you can cash in. You guys both went for the higher numbers, and I was noticing as you guys were playing, I kept pulling out like single 1, 1, 1, 1, and I'm moving up, small on the board. You guys were pulling out some of the bigger numbers. So I think you guys both played that to your advantage, because there were a couple times I'm like, how is David already on the last circle, top of the pot, working his outer rim type of thing? And it was because you guys were using bigger numbers. So it's really cool how you can build your pot, how you can play it, how much, whatever you want to spend to get the those different chits and the colors on that to build your pot. I think you guys both played that kind of the same way in that last game that we played.
Yeah, but somehow it didn't work out for me. But I think that's because my pot exploded at the end. I feel like though that last round, if your pot explodes, you're done and you're not going to win. But we didn't necessarily play according to the rules at the end. We weren't taking one chit at a time, and so I knew, and I think David, you knew. Okay, I got to keep going, and mine didn't work out. David's did. So
Yeah, for me, this game holds kind of a special place in my heart because it was one of the first games I think that David had taught me. It was one of the first games I realized that was out there that wasn't Mousetrap or something super there's setup to it, but this has a lot of setup to it, and it was. I literally probably thought, David, all cool games are bag pulling games. I literally was like, this is amazing. Like, I like the style of it. And you guys know me. I've talked about this for probably 10 episodes already. I like the chancy push your luck. I like that little bit of unknown in a game. But this game was one of the first games that had, each round you have a different action card that you're playing out of that game. This game was one of the first games that you had all those ingredient books had something different on them that you have to start reading those. You have to know what you're doing, where you're at, where a round is. It was very, for me at the time, very complicated game. And I really opened my eyes to gaming in this other world. And so for that, I'm actually really grateful for this game because it really was just something fun. And I think we played it for like a couple weeks in a row when we first started playing it. I just really, really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game I definitely like to introduce people to. Just because I think it has like a moderator kind of thing where if one person knows really how to play the game well, it's easy to teach new players. I think sometimes the game might be a little bit trickier if it's, nobody really knows how to play it and they're all kind of new to modern board gaming. It might be a little bit tougher to kind of get that first go, but once they kind of get it down. But this game, if you have a host, like somebody that, knows modern board games, I think it's an easy game where you can invite people over. They don't necessarily have to know how the round flows. You're just telling them, hey, look for these. And they're just kind of looking at their board and giving you the feedback. Oh, yeah, I do have a green chip on my bag that scores. You could further that process. Because I do think the implementation of how the rounds flow and then the simultaneous nature of it are two things that I always really like. I think it has a really good flow when you're kind of going through like the mid round where you're kind of just doing all the transactional things. But I also like simultaneous play. And then I like the random chance because like Daniela was saying to us earlier, me and Chris, we could maybe strategize it out or, maybe kind of go down that route. But at the end of the day, if we're not pulling the right chips out of the bag, we can still, lose to somebody who maybe doesn't have the best strategy in the game, but, they're pulling out the right chips at the right time. So, I do like that aspect that I feel like when everything gets to the table, that randomness aspect definitely helps to even out the game so that, the more experienced players, they'll win maybe most of the time, but not all the time. There's a percentage there where, you have a couple of bad rounds in a row and, it's hard to catch back up.
Yeah. But there are some good catch-up mechanisms to this game,
Yes.
too. And I agree with your point on having a host for this game, because when you are going through, like you said, that bid round to go, okay, we're doing this action, take your gem, do this, take, are you going to pay, are you going to do this? It helps flow the game. And I think people will grab onto that, and it'll be a fun game to teach new people.
Yeah, and you talked about simultaneous play. There's very little downtime in this, right? Because again, you're pulling out things simultaneously, but then you just kind of step it through. I was looking for a time to just get a drink or do something. Like you couldn't find that time because you were always doing something, as opposed to a turn-based game where there's a decent amount of downtime. This is constantly doing something.
I think we all appreciate that too. I think that we're the type of gamers too. When we come to the table, we don't like a lot of downtime. We like simultaneous play because we know certain times we play and it's like, oh gosh, 5 minutes for one person to do something. And this is it's great to learn that action as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this is like, you're playing your own map. And when you're playing your own map, I would just be drawing out stuff. And then I would just hear like random shouts from like either Chris or Daniela. Like, so I knew something bad had happened to them, but, I'm not looking up. I'm kind of keep drawing, but I'm laughing in the back of my head until it happens to me. And then I'm like, oh, crap, And I think that's always fun because you're just hearing random stuff kind of go around the table, even though you're kind of in your own little world. People hitting cherry bombs.
Yeah, which I think is a good sign because, again, we talk about me being an introvert and all that. But if you're hearing me not just mumbling to myself, but kind of yelling out, kind of thing, so it's got me going.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing that I really like about this game, I like the theme. I think it's a fun theme. It's funny when you think about it, but also just the artwork's really good. And I think everything's kind of built into it. To me, it's still a yellow chip, but Danielle's grabbing a mandrake. I can hear her over there say, I'm going to grab a mandrake. So I thought that was funny too, that, you kind of get into the theme of brewing this potion. But again, it's kind of funny that, hey, these are people that really don't know what they're doing, and that's why your pot can explode. They're just trying to fool people on the streets of Quedlinburg. So and it's a pretty funny theme for me.
Yeah, I think that theme comes out for sure. I think it's one of the last points I wanted to make too was just the theme. I think you're brewing something, you're pouring random stuff in it. Is it going to work out or is it not? So that's really cool too as well.
Yeah, and I think, Daniel, you mentioned this earlier, but the catch-up mechanics, they're built in. So there's like these rat tails. So if somebody gets a little bit further ahead in the game, the starting point of where you start, in the middle of the pot, you get rat tails that it helps players that are behind feel like they're still involved and that they're still getting something. I know I played this game many times where, with newer gamers and they're like, they look at the scoreboard and they're like, oh, I'm behind. But then you give them rat tails and they're just like all happy again.
Yeah.
They almost don't even care what the score is. So they're like, oh, I get like 8 rat tails, then I'm in. So I do like that aspect of that game, that there are a lot of catch-up mechanics in there, so that people don't feel like they're totally out of it.
Yeah. And there were a couple times I know we were like hoping for rat tails, some of us, and they were like, oh no, we're in the same square, so we didn't get this. We didn't get anything. But yeah, we were leapfrogging pretty good there. So it was a good last game that we did play. So I really enjoyed it. But how about any frustrations? Anything that just kind of, we're not complaining about the game as a whole or anything, but just anything that you might like to see a little bit differently in the games? Chris?
Yeah, I think there is a decent amount of setup, but I think that might be all how you put it together and take it out. But there is a decent amount of setup to get everything rolling. Other than that, there is a second side to the board, and so there's the standard side where you're just kind of moving around the cauldron. And there's a second side that has test tubes down at the bottom, and when you can move your drop, which is one of the benefits to be able to fill your pot up more, you can choose between those two. And I do feel like when you're playing that side, if you're not moving along the test tubes, you're not winning. There's a lot of points. There's a lot of extra chips down there. And so when I go to that side, I do feel like, well, it's almost kind of already self-determined that, okay, when I move it, I almost always have to move down in that bottom, or at least the vast majority of it. And I did do some testing. David let me take the copy home, and I was playing multi-handed and said, okay, let me play that side, play 3 different people, 3 different ways. And it was the one I was playing where you just never went to the test tubes, got blown away. But it was pretty close to where you're trying to find that balance. But I do think it's a little bit, hey, that side is there. If you're not using it, then you're not winning. So, but it's still fun and a little different though.
Okay. David, how about you?
I mean, my biggest thing with this game is actually there's 2 versions of this game. So the game has 2 expansions. I know we didn't get to play them together as a group. But the 2 expansions are, I think it's called the Herb Witches and the Alchemist.
Yes.
And so when we were playing these, I played the base game because the base game could have up to 4 players play. And then I saw a thing called the Mega Box. So I said, I want the Mega Box because it has both expansions and I could play 5 players. So I was like, why would I not buy it? And so I remember buying it. and I gave away my smaller version of the the small box version I gave away. And I will say, I think that was a mistake, even though I don't like owning the same copy of multiple games. But this is a game I used to travel with. I used to take to people's houses. And with the big box version, it's just something I can't do. And I don't know necessarily if they could have put it in a different format, because there's a lot of stuff in that box, but there's a lot of empty space in that box too. And it's a weird looking box. Like, it's a really long box, kind of like your old like Clue and stuff. Just think of that size kind of a box, like a Monopoly box. But not square, it's a rectangle, and it's just really hard, to get in a backpack if you're board gaming. If you're bringing games to a lot of places, and so the physical limitations of that mistake I made leads me not to play this game nearly as much as I used to. Just because it's one of the games I would always just bring to somebody's house if I didn't know if they played board games, because I know I would enjoy it and I could teach them maybe something and kind of get them into what the hobby looks like. So I know it's not necessarily a knock on the base game or anything like that, but just kind of be aware if you're buying versions. We'll kind of go over it in Collector's Corner, but there are big differences, I think, in how you get that to the table and played.
Yeah, I have the Carcassonne big box, and it's got like 11 expansions in it. But that box is twice as... I'm looking at Quacks of Quedlinburg behind you. That big box is twice as big as that. It's like the same cross-section, but twice as thick. And yeah, I can't take that anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Shoreline Gaming, bring it in like a rolling suitcase.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the only thing in it, right?
Yeah.
In the suitcase.
And I think, I'm kind of going to hit on both of what you, Chris, and David both just said, is a little bit of the setup, and I would say the intimidation factor for somebody who you might be pulling this out or have it already set up on the table. You're coming to it and you're seeing all these pieces and you're going, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing here? There's too much to track and too much to keep track of. And as you're going through it, you might have to read a lot, but it really is, if you can get people involved in this initial game, there really is not a lot to read. There is a lot of good understanding. There's good camaraderie as you're going around through the game. So don't be intimidated by that, even though there are a lot of pieces and there's a lot of setup, and you're looking at the tracking board. There's just a lot on the table, but it's really not that much as you start to play through it. So, don't be intimidated by that, even though there's a lot of pieces, parts, and things like that. So,
yeah.
Any other frustrations with the game?
Yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind for me is, a bad draw can really, really hose you. Now, again, you can set up your bag to try to help against that, but still, what you pull out is what you pull out. And if it happens early, and when you're not getting many points anyway, okay. If it happens in that 8th or 9th round where you're counting on finishing that round at 10, 11, 12 points or something like that from what you pull out, and you get a whole bunch of white chips that come out and everybody else is scoring 12 and you're stuck, that's just, it kind of destroys the game for you after. Again, it's not that long of a game, but still, one bad draw at the wrong time can really just hose you.
Yeah, and I think that can happen in my last round. I had my best draw, but it's funny how close we all came to each other being very, very close. And like you just said, one bad draw. And I'm wondering, though, if that can work out within each round. Like you're kind of saying, if you have 2 rounds that are really poor draws, like I'm not sure you're really catching up. Rat tails can only do so much. They can only move you so many spaces. But that would be interesting to see if you... It wouldn't be interesting. That would suck to see if you had continuous bad pulls.
Right. I think first couple rounds, I don't really care. If I explode my pot in the first couple rounds, I'll give up the points. I'll get the extra chips. I'm giving up 1 point.
Yeah.
Maybe 2, and I'm getting rat tails for it. If that happens in the second half of the game, big deal.
Yeah.
And again, you can have your potion over there so you can put 1 chip back in, but number 1, you can't always get it. And number 2, you can still get hosed. Well, and it's just, if you get hosed late, you're done.
And that's probably part of picking the right chits to put in the actual pot, so you can do either the foreshadowing. You can see some of those have the option of, you can look at some and put them back in, or you can use different colors to do different things to be able to kind of manipulate your pot a little bit more. So
yeah, I'm just a little bitter on the last game there. On the last game, we were playing with the yellow mandrakes, where, hey, if you pull a yellow out after a white one, that white one goes back in your bag. And I had like 7 yellow chits in there. I mean, it was probably not 7 because I can't have 7, but I had as many yellow chits as I could have, I had in my bag. And I think one of them came out that last round. And then all my whites came out, and I knew I had to push it, and I exploded it because it wasn't working. But again, that's part of the game.
Yeah.
But once that happened to me, I was done. I couldn't catch up.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. David, how about the collector's corner for this game? Where are we sitting at here?
Okay, so right now, if you were to go out and buy this game on Amazon, you can actually find this base game at Amazon or at Target. It's the 4-player version, smaller box, and it's $39.99 at both of those stores. I did some quick research because this game's been out for a while. Normally if a game comes out at Target, the game's been out and it's now hitting mainstream. And I looked at the secondhand market and I was surprised because this game is holding its weight around $30 still. So, I would say, it's definitely a good value. There's a lot of, cardboard pieces in this, but there is a lot of pieces in general. I mean, it is a game that I feel like could justify a $40 price point. I think you will get a lot of plays out of it. So I think it's something that will be good. On the other hand, if you're going for the big box version, right now it's averaging at $74.99 on Amazon. And, when I looked at the value on the secondary market for that bigger box version of the game, the secondary market, it's closer to around $50. $50, $55, I was seeing you can get a copy of it. And I think part of it has to do with people realizing that, when you have it, it's got to be something that you're playing more like at your house or something. You're not really bringing that with you anymore. And I think that because of that form factor, the value isn't as high in the secondary market right now as you think it would be. The drop's pretty significant.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that makes a good point too. That if you own this game, you're probably keeping it at your house and having people come to your house and play it as well. Is there any upgrades for this game? Do you know of?
Yes, there's a lot of upgrades. The biggest upgrade is the chits that you play with. You can get those to be acrylic. Oh. They're very awesome and nice, and I just haven't ponied up yet for them.
Have you ever played with them though?
I have not.
Okay.
But another game that's a bag pulling game that we got because of this was Wonderland's War. And I did get the acrylics for that. We just haven't played it.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the price of that, but there's 215 ingredient kits. So that's probably not cheap to get that up.
It's a lot of cardboard punching.
But I think it's worth it if you really like this game.
Yeah, and I have heard people say it's just an awesome feel and sound and all that.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it probably sounds a little clinky in your bag.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for that discussion so far on the Quacks of Quedlinburg. We're going to wrap this up with just some final thoughts. I'll start just, overall, again, this game holds a special place in my heart just because it was one of the first games I did play with. I would say don't be intimidated by this game, especially for bringing it out around the new people. Take the time, host it, lead it, let people learn just the different mechanics of this game. It's fun. It's got a lot of art. It's got a lot of colorfulness. It's a little bit thinky, but it's fun. It's simultaneous play. There's just a lot to it that I think is a good group game that is able to be played. And so I really enjoyed this game. So, Chris?
Yeah, I enjoyed this game as well. I think there's a lot of good to it. If you're looking for a super heavy game, this isn't it, but it doesn't try to be that. This is just a fun game. Again, every time I've played this, everybody at the table is having a really good time. Even when something bad happens, it's like, and it's fun to have that something bad happen. I think it plays just as well with 5 people as it does with 2 because of that simultaneous play. So however many people you have around the table, this to me is still a good game to pull out. So I like it a lot.
Cool. David?
Yeah, my final thoughts are I wish this game actually played 7 or 8. I mean, I think it could do that. To me, I'm always looking for kind of games that kind of fill higher player counts. And for this, I think there's no reason why you couldn't play other than you'd have to have more pieces.
Just the chits, yeah.
But, in my opinion on that, I really wish it went higher. I'll always kind of play this game. It does hold a special place in my heart too, Danielle, just like it does yours. I taught this game to a lot of people. I just really like it. I think it's fun. And it's something that, I think you could teach everybody and they'll have a good time with it. And it's fast. It's not going to overstay its welcome, which I like.
All right, everyone. I think the townsfolk here in Quedlinburg are about to realize that we are just a bunch of quacks. So we're going to take a short break here as we flee the town. And will we make it out? Well, it just might be a long shot.
Longshot, the dice game, is a push-your-luck roll and write game that has players influencing and betting on 8 horses as they gallop, trot, and sometimes flop around the racetrack. Each round starts with a dice roll that determines which horses move and how far. Players then each get to take one action. You can choose to bet on the horse that's moving, assuming you have enough money left. These bets may or may not pay off depending on where the horse finishes in the race. Or you can choose to buy the horse. This often comes at a steep cost, but grants you special perks and can pay off big if the horse wins, places, or shows. Or you may choose to buy a helmet, allowing you to bet on a horse even when they're really close to finishing, or buy a jersey, allowing you to add additional movement for a horse of your choice when another moves. Finally, you can choose to visit the concessions, filling in an array that will eventually grant you perks such as extra money, free bets, moving horses forward or backward, or even buying a horse for free. The madness continues until 3 horses manage to cross the finish line, at which point players combine their points from horses they own, bets they placed, money remaining, and sets of jerseys and helmets that they've collected. The player who parlayed their efforts into the most points wins the game, and you heard that straight from the horse's mouth. Longshot the Dice Game was designed by Chris Handy and was first published in 2019 by Perplexed.
All right, Chris, thanks for that intro on there. Longshot is a game we played to the table a couple times now. So this is a really kind of exciting game. It's very betty. It's very fast paced. It's kind of moving back and forth and back and forth as you're going through it. But what are everybody's best moments of this game? I'm kind of just going to start with this just because when we're playing this game the last two times, I'll say the first game I played was much better than the second, and that's what betting is, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the game in managing the horses, but there's a lot you can't manage, and I really love that risk that's back and forth. But the best moment, again, one of the first games that I played with this was just my horse is finishing, right? Like it's just they finish and they're getting you money and they're getting you points. And it was great to do that. And a lot of it was just so chancy. I literally did nothing to make those horses come around because maybe some other people were having the same horses that they were trying to push across the finish line as well. But it was a great feeling. And I feel like that's how real races would be. I mean, there's nothing you're really doing. You're not going and, feeding the horse and taking care of it and doing the trial times of it, but super chancy game that was just a lot of fun to see how it ended up panning out. So that's one of the funnest moments for me. Just didn't do anything and I made out, and that made $1. So that was great. David, how about you?
Yeah, so I played this game for a little bit now. It's been in my collection. I think when I first got it, I played it quite often, and then it kind of faded into the background. And I think I originally bought this game because I was going to like a Thanksgiving or something, and I wanted to get something that was light enough where I could sit around and play it with, I think it's like 6 or 8 people that could play this game. And I wanted to sit around and be able to do something that was different, than the games that we had previously played. And so I got this game, and I will say, because I've played it at a high player count now and a low player count. And I will say, I think at a lower player count, it's a little bit more strategic. It's this kind of the stuff like when we were playing Seven Wonders together. There's a little bit more you can control, even though you can't control a whole lot because it is dice rolling and there is that luck element. But when you're playing with a lot more people, especially when you only roll the dice like once out of every 7 turns around the table. There's so much stuff going on in between with people placing bets or moving horses back or forwards. It's a little chaotic. So. To me, the best moments I think about this game is that I'm exploring the different layers of it. I think there are a lot of layers because, like Danielle was saying, the first time we played this game, totally different than the last time we played it. And, every time I play it, I feel like I see a little bit more of that onion being peeled back. And I'm like, oh, there's all of this that I didn't know actually existed, or I didn't even think about how that could affect the gameplay and trying to manipulate or mitigate that dice roll as best I can. Chris, what did you think?
Yeah, for me, I agree with Daniela that when your horse actually crosses the finish line and, okay, you own that horse, you're getting some points from that. That's a pretty good feeling. Somehow in the last game we played, all 3 of my horses crossed the finish line. So that was...
It was rigged.
Well, it could have been rigged. That's part of the game. But yeah, that feeling when that happens is pretty cool. But I also thought it was pretty fun to try to, because one of those horses before it went over the line, David was ready to take that horse that he knew was going to cross the finish line soon and just get it out of the way and make sure that it didn't happen to me. And so it was a good feeling for me when I rolled that 8-sided die and the right piece came up. But there's a lot of that luck in here, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. It was also fun for me because sometimes losing can be fun too. I think I'm being clever. Like I'm going to move this horse up 3 and move this other horse back 2, and then the next person says, "Well, I'm just going to reverse what you just did," and it's like I just wasted a whole turn on accomplishing absolutely nothing. Which again, for I think that's what this game is. It's you can't predict who horses can go backwards, right? Yeah. Who does that in a horse race? Well, apparently Longshot does.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I was going to say that David just touched on too as well. This is me. Reminded me a little bit of Camel Up. You guys know I like Camel Up, but I wanted this game too, David, like you said, to play. It plays up to 8, so I wanted more people around in the last game that we had played because I was like, I would really love to see the dynamic with a lot more people and. Because then you're going to have more people betting for more horses, with everybody with a lower player count, everybody kind of has their own horses. But if you're manipulating and moving other players and moving them as well, because I know someone across the table or maybe 2 other people have the same horses that I want to, and you can kind of work together. So I'd be really interested to see full player count played at this game. 8 players would be really, really cool.
And I would think a lot of different aspects of the game would come out more. Maybe you don't have to have 8, but again, we played our last game with 3, and I can, I own 3, you own 3, you own 2, or whatever. And so we're trying to get our horses across and not somebody else's. You can have more control over that. If everybody just kind of owns 1, to me, then the jerseys become a lot more important. How am I manipulating things to make sure my horse is moving as much? When I have 3 horses, I got a lot more choices. When I have only 1, perhaps, if there's more players, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, we played more like mule race versus horse race.
Oh, yeah. And I do think that comparison's valid, to Camel Up, because this reminds me of a little bit like Camel Up in a lot of senses, but it's a little bit more sophisticated, I think, in the mechanism it takes, and it is it's a roll and write, because we are writing on our own little boards. And I thought the puzzle, the little mini game that we play on there where you can mark off stuff and the timing of when you get those bonuses, I used to think nothing of it. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to, breeze through that and let me get the bonuses. But there's only so many bonuses you can actually take. And so I think I learned from our first game that we played is it's strategic when you take them. You don't necessarily always want to take them as fast as you can get them, because then you have a lot less that you can mitigate later in the game. So I feel like that was definitely a change and something that I welcome. I kind of want to explore that space more about, when do you actually cross off? Because I think there was a couple times where I should have crossed stuff off. And then the next thing I know, Chris just took a horse across the line. I was like, well, there goes that plan. I just didn't do it fast enough, or, because I was trying to wait and time stuff out better.
But if you do it too fast, you're sitting at the end of the game going, man, I really need one of those special things.
And
I don't have it.
And I think you guys both did that on our first game. The one game that we had played all together the first time, you guys had both went through your concession and were done first, and I still had quite a few to tick off. Not that helped me, but I think it did in that first game. It kept my options a little bit more open. So you definitely need to be placing bets. You need to be doing your jerseys and helmets. You need to be doing a lot of that pretty balanced, I think, moving in through whenever the first horse crosses, because then the other ones are coming.
Yeah, and this is another game where, just because somebody's horses cross the line or they get points for that doesn't mean you can't win still. There's a lot to do with, the money and the multipliers and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of different avenues, I think, to winning, not just necessarily having to own the right, horse, or in Camel Up, the right camel, right? So there's which I like, that there's just more ways to win than just, hey, your person's horse crossed first doesn't always necessarily mean that person wins the game.
Well, I think the game, one of the games we played was just before this recording, and I mentioned that, all 3 of my horses went across, but you had the right bets on the right horses, and I won it, but I didn't win it by much. At least over you, David.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
Dude, I was terrible. I ended up with 2 nickels. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just some of our best moments throughout this game. Super fun, fast paced, kind of a little bit of thinky too, but some manipulation as well going on. But overall, just really interesting. So how about some of our frustrations with the game? How about you, Chris? Anything that you can think of?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the components to me aren't that awesome. Sure, we're using dry erase boards to write on, but the board isn't quite flat. The dice, I think, are a little cheap on the dice, and so
they're
the
small
components
too.
Yeah. So the components, right? That's a great point. That you're gonna have 8 people around the table. Make the dice bigger so you can see it.
Yeah,
because the numbers on those dice
are
were
really small. Yeah.
Other than that, I think the second game we played was much different than the first game we played, and I thought much better. The first game that we played, it was like 3 horses for me. It was, but there was 3 horses that were out front, and then there was this group of horses that you knew weren't going to win.
Yeah.
This most recent game that we played, all the horses were moving. And in reality, if we manipulated it right, we could have made any horse win. I really enjoyed that. But I felt like that first game that we played where there was a couple horses out, it took a little something away from the game when it started with the same horses getting out early.
Right. And what Chris is talking about with the board game folds into 4, it opens up 4 different ways. So, yeah, it doesn't really lay flat. I mean, it's nice because it's small and you can pack it away, which is good. But yeah, the board and then the little wooden horses are kind of corny, but they're colorful enough. But David, how about you? How about some frustrations?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest frustration with this game is that for whatever reason, the iconography just doesn't stick with me from game to game. So when I cross off a jersey or a helmet, I'm still like, what do I do? It doesn't necessarily translate in my brain to, when I cross off the helmet, then I can bet on that guy, after it crosses this line over here on the other side of the board. And I think, even with a jersey, it takes me a while, and even then, even in my brain right now, I don't know if it makes sense. I think sometimes when you teach board games, the more you can logically make those steps. And I think that the jumps for whatever reason, the iconography and the jump you have to make to what action it partakes, even though it's clearly laid out on the board and it's well written, it just still doesn't click in my head like Quacks. Quacks
Yeah.
is a game that clicks in my head. This game, I'm still like, wait, okay, I do a jersey. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The jersey correlates to what?
Exactly.
Right. It makes sense that there's a helmet. It makes sense there's a jersey. Why the helmet lets you bet after a certain point? No idea.
Yeah,
Right? Just
yeah.
because it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think one of my frustrations with this was the actual horses that you buy and the points or the action on them that you can actually take. I didn't think they were sweet. The first game I played, I took one horse because the way I play is when I start a new game, I generally don't take the little side game that's going on as well. I took one horse in that game. I ended up being over 100 something points, 115 points or whatever. I took two horses on the last game that I played and ended up with like $70 or something super lame. And I didn't think that they helped me at all. Like maybe if you win with that horse and you get it, but that's like 8 different horses and only 3 are getting across. And I get it. That's the chancy part of it. But there was a couple times Chris kept looking at his horses too. He had 3 and was like, I didn't do that action, or I'm not doing that, or when did I do this in my little concession stand? I didn't take what I was supposed to receive from that action. So
I had that written down as a frustration too, just because not just that the actions, okay, are any of them that good? Maybe that comes to the price, but just even understanding what in the heck is this allowing me to do, right? And maybe that goes back to, okay, if I have a jersey, then I get to do this with the ticket, and I get to do that. And it's like, I don't even know what this power is allowing me to do.
yeah, the wording is a bit goofy.
Yeah.
I mean, so another frustration I had about this game, and it's a really minor one. It's just kind of, Chris was talking about the pieces in the game. You know, the horses are great because they're wood, but the way you have to move them, it's very clunky, and they're very big, and the board is really small.
Yes.
And so, like, to try to grab the right number, especially when they all start together, you know, you're kind of trying not to knock down other horses, especially when they're moving, because they're they look like they're top heavy because the pieces are really long. And so I just wonder how many other people have played this game, and if something bumps the table, all these horses are just falling over, and they're like, where was this horse?
Yeah.
It didn't happen to us, but I could see this happening, especially when you're trying to play it at a higher player count. You know, somebody's just, nudging that table, and the horses are like, falling on their side. So I just think it was a weird choice for that physical game piece to be that way. I don't know. It just doesn't resonate a little bit.
They're
to
pretty
me.
big for the size of some of those. Some of the spaces are big. Some of them get really small, especially if they're taking the turn tight. And yeah, exactly where was this horse?
Yeah.
Not sure. What's going on.
There was one time, David, too, that you moved it and you're like, wait, is this a space? Like a little bit more legible lines, maybe, for sure.
Yeah, because the spaces, like Chris was saying, they're not even. I almost rather just have a straight board and just let the horses run straight. I know that's maybe less thematic, but it's kind of like a carnival game. If the horse is just kind of going straight, I could see all the lines ahead of time. Sometimes I don't know how many lines, unless I'm really looking at the board. How many spaces is it until it gets to that turn? Because the spaces are different sizes. So
Different sizes, and some of them were kind of like at an angle.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was just the art style making things look kind of weird, but I don't know, maybe if they had AI, do that for you.
If you don't know that reference, listen to the beginning. All right, that was great. Thanks, guys. David, how about the collector's corner on this one?
yeah, so this game right now you can find on Amazon. It's going for $26.97. And for those of you who can't actually see this game in your head, it's actually a really small box game. I want to say it's about maybe 10 inches by 6 or 7 inches, but it's something that you can fit, with you if you're going on a trip. It has a magnetic lid. So I think as far as like the form factor of, are you trying to take this to play with other people and travel? I think it's really good. So just know that the price is a little bit lower because the box size itself is going to be smaller than like a normal, square game box that you might be thinking in your head, kind of like Quacks is what I call a normal size board game box, the kind that you like to put on your shelves that looks good. This is, secondhand though on this game right now, it's going for around $20. So it's still going to hold, a lot of its value. I don't really see that there's a big difference, a drop off from buying brand new to buying used right now on this type of game. At least what's currently available, on the secondary market across the board. So, either way, it's going to be around $20, $25 new or used. Is what it's looking like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, David, for that. Final thoughts here too. I think just overall for me, the game, I think this was fun to bring to the table. There's a lot to it. You have to do a little bit more work to understand the iconography, like we had been talking about and stuff like that. But overall, I think you're going to have a fun time with this game. It's one to bring to the table. Try and play it with as many people as you possibly can, up to 8. Let us know kind of how that works. If anybody has played that at 8, I'm sure we'll probably try and get it to a game night, one that we host over at the church at some point here in the future too, which would be really cool to see. So overall, yeah, things just Longshot was fun for me. I enjoyed enjoyed it as a new person. And hedge your bets, as David always likes to say. I'm going to hedge my bet. David, how about you? Any final thoughts on this game for you?
Yeah, so my final thoughts on this game is, every time I play this game, I think it gets a little bit better. And I will say that's a compliment, because not every game I play more gets better. A lot of games, the more you play them, sometimes it starts going the opposite way. But for whatever reason, I think with this game itself, the more I play it, the more I do tend to enjoy it. The more I see little nuances and little other ways of manipulation, so that you can mitigate die rolls. And I do like that, about this game. And I do like the small size box. So, those are kind of my final thoughts. If you're looking for something, they could travel easily with, that you're, bring a little bit different style to a game night, I think this will be good for like an opening game on a game night. To Chris.
Yeah, I think if I were a betting man, which I'm not, but if I were, then I would not bet on me buying this game. I think it's fun. I think it's okay to play it every once in a while. It's not something that I would see myself owning. I enjoy light games on occasion, but I think if I'm looking for a light game, I'm probably not pulling this one out if it was on my shelf. It was fun. It was a little different. I don't know. I just didn't get the level of fun that I would want to out of a game like that. Okay. So for me, it was good. I'm not going to say nope. I'm not playing it, but I'm also not asking for someone to take it down off their shelf.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. So awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, guys. Seems like we hit the trifecta on that one, and it's time to load up the trailers and hit the road and dodge the poo. Let's take a moment to catch our breath, then hit the ground running with our Battle of the Funnest.
All right, everyone, the moment of truth has arrived. It's time to separate the men from the boys, or, more appropriately, the games from the toys. We're going to put these two games head-to-head against each other in the ultimate face-off. In one corner, weighing in at 1.95 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 7.8. Known worldwide as the shadiest charlatans ever to share a sham, the most maniacal of medics and daffiest of doctors Deutschland dared to deride, the prized procurers of perfect potions and enemies of tailless rats everywhere, the Quacks of Quedlinburg. In the other corner, weighing in at 1.92 out of 5 with an overall BGG rating of 7.7, discovered on a small farm next to an abandoned glue factory, banned from every respectable racing establishment, and even a few shady ones, the bothersome bane of befuddled bettors, may the odds never be in your favor, Longshot, the dice game. And now, let's find out which one is the last game standing in our Battle of the Funnest Showdown. Okay, guys, you know how this works. We're going to evaluate these games head-to-head in 5 different categories: theme and production, mechanisms, value for your time, replayability, and the fun factor. We'll each choose which game we think outdoes the other in each category. And the game that gets the most votes wins the category, and the game that wins the most categories takes the prize in our Battle of the Funnest. So let's get to it, and we'll start with theme and production. David, I'm going to you first.
Ooh, this one's a tough one for me. I really enjoy horse games, and for whatever reason, I collect them. And I don't care kind of what the game is about. I normally just buy them if I see them come up. To me, this one's tough, but I do like the theme just more just because I like horses. And so it's something that I collect in my collection. And so for that reason, I'm just going to give it a little nudge over Quacks. To Daniela.
All right. I am actually going to choose Quacks on this. I like the whole idea of pouring the potions and different herbs and things like that into the pots to see if they can explode. I think thematically that came out better for me. Chris.
Yeah, for me, I'm going with Quacks as well. And I think for me, it's not even close. I like the theme better just because I like the concept of magic. And so where horses pull you in, David, magic pulls me in regardless. But I also think from a production standpoint, I still have a little bit of issue with Longshot and some of the components in there. Quacks, I think, does it better. Not that the components are amazing, but they're pretty cool. So I'm going with Quacks, which means Quacks wins theme and production 2-1. Moving on to mechanisms, I'll start with you, Daniela, first.
All right, mechanisms for this. Again, Quacks is going to take it for me. I just think the simplicity of the iconography and what it does, it's all laid out there for me. I think Longshot might have had a better shot if they would have done a little bit more of explaining, or maybe had a little player card next to people to understand that iconography. But the mechanics overall for me, it's Quacks. David, how about you?
Yeah, this one's Quacks for me, kind of hands down. I love bag pulling as a mechanic. This this does it super well. That tension's there every time you're pulling from the bag. What am I going to get? What am I not going to get? And then just the smoothness of this game. Sometimes that flow factor matters a lot to me. And the way the game does it and the flow of the mechanics once you go into, the end of the round, I think just flows really smooth. And, to me, that just takes it over, I think, more the choppiness of what I get from Longshot. To Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Quacks as well. I think I commented earlier about just how fun it is to pull that chip out of the bag, see what it is, some of the great times that we had on that. I do think, though, Longshot has some neat mechanisms in there. I just think they get lost in some of the iconography, and I think those would be a lot more fun to play with, at least for me, if I didn't have to always think, okay, what does that do? How does this work, etc. So it might have been closer, but I'm still going with Quacks. So 3-0, Quacks takes mechanisms. Value for your time. David.
Yeah, to me, this one is going to be Quacks for me on value for time. I just think that the more I play Quacks, I never really notice the time go by. It's just, okay, I'm playing it and you're telling me it's a half hour. And I'm like, yeah, that's always worth it for me as far as the value for the time. I think Longshot ran the couple times we played it around 45 minutes. And I think that's just some of the clunkiness, again, with the user interface and how you interact with it and kind of the flow of that game. So value for time for me on this one is Quacks by Longshot.
All right. I think for the value for time, I'm going to agree with David. Quacks is going to take it for me. For Quacks, when you're playing it, you're hyping up to the end of the game and you're really trying to see, where are we going and what are our rounds and what are we going to pull. I think there was a little bit of a ramp up with Quacks. With Longshot, I remember being like halfway through, like, oh my gosh, like only one horse is crossed. And like to me, there was a down ramping actually in Longshot. So I think just overall, like I want a game to end on a pretty high note and not just be like, oh, okay, come on, let's get the other ones. There was a little too much back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the last couple of horses. So for me, Quacks is going to take this one. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, it's going to be Quacks for me as well. I think they both took about the same amount of time. I had a lot more fun with Quacks, and I agree. It doesn't feel like time's passing by when you're playing Quacks, and so I definitely went with that. And Daniela, to your point, with respect to the game kind of building up towards the end, I think that's one of the keys to good game design is, first of all, the game feels different at the beginning, middle, and end, but also that, it's building to this, climax or crescendo there. And I think Quacks does a really good job of that. Your last round of pooling is definitely very different than your first one. So Quacks takes that one 3-0 as well. Replayability. I'll start here on this one. Replayability is a tough one for me on this one, actually, because Quacks sometimes for me actually feels like, especially in those early rounds, they're always the same. I already know what I'm going to do. But at the same time, it has a lot of different potion books that you can choose from. And so it does a good job of allowing you to see different things. I feel like Longshot probably has some replayability in it as well. They got a lot of cards in there. But again, because of the different benefits that you got not being really much to draw me in, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with Quacks again. Daniela.
So this is going to be different because I'm actually going to go with Longshot here. I think Quacks for the replayability, for me, every single time I know what to expect. I can't, even though there's a chancy bit of it, you may not know exactly how the whole game's going to end. You kind of do know where you're going to end because of your own bag. With Longshot, I think that every time you play it, as David kind of said in our overall overview of the game, every time there's something new, there's different layers, there's something coming out that you might be able to build on a little bit more. So I think Longshot for me probably has a little bit more replayability just because of the unknowns, and maybe over time that'll change, but for today it's Longshot. David, how about you?
Yeah, so this one's a tough one. I can see both viewpoints that you guys have. For me, I'm going to have to just give a little slight edge to Longshot on this. Like I said before, every time I play this game, I think I'm just peeling a little bit of that onion layer back. I'm finding something new to dig into. I'm going into the next game being like, what if I did this strategy? We're kind of like Quacks, kind of like Danielle was saying, I played enough. I know what I'm going to get. It's going to be not necessarily similar because you can mix up a lot of the ingredient cards, and I do love that. But it's the same. I know what I'm getting. It's kind of a known quantity, which I like, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like that game a lot. But with Longshot, there's always just something that I'm like, oh, I didn't see that last time. Where Quacks, I don't know if I say that every time I play the game, and so for that reason, I'm gonna have to go with Longshot and replayability for right now.
All right, there you go. Longshot making a run to try to come back in it. Longshot wins replayability 2-1. Our last category, fun factor. David, I'll come right back to you.
So this one is not as hard as the last category. I'm going to go with Quacks on the fun factor. I always have fun playing Quacks. Daniela was mentioning it earlier. I think it crescendos at the right time, on most games, unless you just are really pulling bad stuff all game. And the second part of the reason why I think it's just fun is I just can't get over the fact that, when I pull out chips, like kind of we were talking about in our playthrough, I couldn't even look. I was holding them up to Daniela, like, just please tell me it's not a white one. And, if a game's going to do that, to me, that excitement and that level of nervousness, that tension that's in that game where you want it, to me, Quacks kind of takes the cake on that. And it's something that I haven't experienced yet in Longshot. So, Daniela.
Oh, I agree with David. This is going to be a tough one because I think that there's potential for both. And I think for me, the one that's going to eke out is going to be Quacks on this for the simple fact that at 3 players, it was great. And at 3 players, Longshot was not great for me. I think Longshot probably could hold a candle to the Quacks on this category if there were 8 people. I think there'd be a lot of interaction, a lot of movement, a lot of excitement, a lot of simultaneous playing out at the same time too. But I haven't played it with that. It's hard to get 8 people together who want to play a game like that together. So, you can sit down with 2 people in Quacks or, 4 people, however many it goes up to, and it still be fun. And so I'm just going to have to give it to that until I can play Longshot at 8. Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Quacks as well for a lot of the reasons that have already been mentioned here and that we mentioned earlier in the episode, that there was just a lot of fun moments. We were smiling a lot when we were playing Quacks of Quedlinburg for a variety of reasons. So that was fun. I'm not a big risk taker. I'm a very conservative guy. Quacks still has me. I'm going to chance it. I'm going to chance it. Inevitably, I'm blowing up my potion. So maybe that's why I'm a conservative guy. But I had a lot of fun playing with that, and I always do. So I'm going with Quacks there as well, which means that Quacks will win that one 3-0. And so there you have it, folks. With the score of 4-1, the Quacks of Quedlinburg lucks into a victory in this episode's Battle of the Funnest. Let us know if you agree with how the judges called this one.
All right, well, against all odds, we've made it to the end of another episode of The Fifth Meeple. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to get in touch with us, email us at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com or at fifthmeeple on Instagram. Thanks for taking a chance with us, and until next time, may luck be on your side. Don't even put that in the bloopers.
No, that's going in the bloopers. Hey, Mom, listen to this.
Well, they're just not going to get a lot of spice.
Yeah. You can choose to place a bet on any horse, assuming you have enough money left. That's not true, is it?
And then I'm going to take a pee.
I mean, if you don't listen to our podcast for any other reason, you should just listen to it.
I gotta pee.
Yes.
I added the poo. Yeah, no, that was good.